Do you like cracking packs? Join the Jackalmen Games Patreon to have a chance to win a box every month.
What is up, guys? This is Ray and Ashton from Jackalmen Games, and today we're going to do a new series known as Let's Talk, where we are going to focus on a deck, a topic, pretty much anything in the world of Star Wars Destiny, and we are just going to, dissect that point a little bit further. So today, me and Ashton have come, to the consensus that Kylo and Arinda Pryce is everywhere, and we want to talk about the deck.
Yes, so if you have not heard about this deck, then you probably are living under a rock. And if that's kind of brutal, then I'm sorry, but it is everywhere. Like literally everyone's talking about it. It's been at every single store championship, unless you're a monk, and it's just really been very, very scary for a lot of people. So we wanted to kind of talk about our experience with the deck, whether it's playing against it or playing it ourselves. I'm going to kind of talk more of this side of it as being an aggro-based player, which Ray is as well. We like that fast damage-dealing decks, and this is something that I played with very little practice, and I wanted to kind of talk about some of the plays that we had when I was doing the live stream, and also what I experienced at the store championship. And Ray's going to talk a little bit first about it as far as what he experienced playing against it in the store championship, and we're going to kind of read through some of these cards. That's what we want to call, I guess, a base build. Right? I mean, it's kind of like what the basis of this is. Very, very standard cards to include.
Yeah, this would be like your prototypical, if you wanted to add this to like a gauntlet list, or you were trying to put this together just to get a feel yourself of exactly how it plays or how to play against it. This would kind of be your baseline to start with. So to hop right in, I'm first going to say the way that I had exposure to this deck was I kind of already identified that Pryce was a really strong character, as soon as she was released. So I really wanted to pair her with Vader 2, which is from Spirit of Rebellion, and it's Darth Vader Dark Apprentice. So I took her and Darth Vader to my store championship, and I quickly realized that as much as it's a quick and fast deck that can really burst out a lot of damage, that Kylo is definitely her, the better character to pair with her. And that's when I kind of turned Ashton to looking into this deck and saying, like, this is probably the optimal character to pair with Pryce. And then we've been kind of just dissecting it further.
Yeah, because for me, like, I like Fifth Brother, like a lot of people did. That special and the Fifth Brother lightsaber he has, and the way to be able to resolve blue ability upgrades without removing them from your pool, like, that's great. So, like, anytime you can use cards or anytime you can use things in the game to resolve your dice and do damage without actually removing them from your pool is huge. That's something that we all try to, abuse and take advantage of. And I was talking to Ray about it for the longest time. And the biggest thing what it came down to is the fact that Kylo is nasty with crossguard lightsaber, and his activation is crazy. And then not only that, but he has that 50% chance of hitting damage, which is huge. And paying that one resource for the two is definitely achievable. Versus with Fifth Brother, you're having that special kind of as his damage potential, and if you're stuck with just that special, or you're stuck with Pryce, and let's say Fifth Brothers die out in the field, you're not going to do much. And that's kind of where it just felt really bad. Like, it didn't have that synergy. It didn't have that constant, threat of damage. And I wanted to try it out a little bit on the last live stream we did on Saturday, and it just tested way better. It's just more fluent. It does damage consecutively. And the greatest part about it is people think Kylo's like the biggest threat. And Ray, why don't you explain to them why he's not necessarily the biggest threat in this build?
So before we get into like the upgrades, the events, I just want to kind of give you guys a brief overview of the characters themselves. Obviously, we are all well aware of Kylo. His point cost, 17 for elite, 12 health. He has his activation ability, 50% damage sides with the 1 pay side. Just a really solid character. I've heard a lot of people say he is the best 17 elite cost character in villain. So just a lot of value there. But the real sleeper, if you will, of this deck is Pryce, and reason is, she has the specials, which gives you that kind of special chaining ability, but she has the ability to really tank in the deck. And what I mean by that is once they're so focused on Kylo, he has some upgrades on him, he has some redeployable upgrades. Once those redeployable upgrades move over to Pryce, she has the ability to finish off games very quickly. Now, when I played against, like, I want to say like pseudo mirror matches, because in the 5-round Swiss I played with my Vader Pryce deck, I played 3 Kylo Pryces. I saw that they immediately targeted Pryce, and that was really rough for me because I couldn't put everything on Vader's shoulders. Whereas in a Kylo Pryce build, you can certainly put the weight on Kylo's shoulders and just continue on through the game. Now, the reason they did that was Pryce is really, the villain Yoda of this deck. She's like the engine that makes Kylo consistent. She allows you to kind of dance around that pay side because you're able to focus with her special. And then if you have the battlefield, when you roll her in, if they have no way of mitigating her specials, the minute you roll in Kylo, the minute other dice is in the pool, it's instant focus into resolve, and it also bumps up the value of whatever you're resolving. So she is the engine. She can finish games herself, and she is definitely the bigger threat. Once we get into some of the other cards in the deck, you'll also see, once she's down, some small events are turned off as well. But she's the definite play to go against it. If you're having trouble against this deck, target Pryce first, and I think things will get a little easier for you. But if you're also interested in playing this deck, I just want you to see the value that she provides, not only through manipulating your dice and helping you become more consistent, but don't be afraid to throw an upgrade on her a little bit later in the rounds, because if Kylo does go down because they're focusing on him, Pryce can finish off games for you with the ability to focus, the upgrades that are on her, and then if you have the battlefield, focus them into further damage and quickly resolve it. So I think that's enough to be said about the characters themselves. I guess let's just get right into these upgrades, Ashton.
Yeah, so one of the things that Ray was mentioning, which is really key, is, putting weapons on her. Don't be afraid to do that later in the game. So after like your first or second round, it could be a potential good idea to put a weapon on her. And one of the weapons that we're going to talk about is the ancient lightsaber. So if you see that they're really trying to target Kylo and you want to possibly keep him, you can always put that ancient on Pryce, and that way when you're rolling out Pryce first before you activate Kylo, you're already getting that lightsaber out, and you can potentially resolve that with a pairing by playing a tactical mastery or something of that sort. But one of the major key auto includes for this deck, I would say, is ancient lightsaber. I've been able to find that a lot of the special chaining, whether you're using some of these other attachments like force speed and such, that this card can really hit hard. And if not, you still get that 2 life gain every time, and you can just play it, roll it out. If you get damage, no big deal. Pop it for the 2 health, get it, and move on. And by doing that to Pryce and keeping her alive to try to tank her, it really does help. Especially if you're pulling in some of these other cards that we're going to go through, like you see over here, like best defense and things of that sort.
Yep.
So Ray, go ahead and cover the next one.
So this is why I think, obviously Kylo is the best pairing with her, is he does have access to things like crossguard, lightsaber. Being able to drop a crossguard first turn, on Kylo, ping your opponent for that 1 damage on whatever character, then next action activate Kylo, and if he hits his ability for another 2 before you've even resolved any damage any dice on your characters, you've already done 3 damage, and it's just really strong. Another kind of thing to note, obviously it has the melee sides, it has a shield, a resource. The special on there, even if you do not control the battlefield and Pryce rolls into the specials and you just want to push out a little bit more damage, you can then essentially special chain, and since you are resolving specials, you can resolve both of those dice together. And it's just good, if you're playing against a deck that runs a lot of shields, or you just want to push out a little bit more damage in that turn, you can certainly do that. So I can't say enough about crossguard. it works perfectly with Kylo.
I think that's another auto include for sure.
Yep.
And the next obvious auto include is going to be Force Illusion. So you're going to see this. You're always going to see it. It's always going to be there. I mean, it's a neutral 1 cost, which is great mitigation card, so to speak, as far as your damage. Just make sure you keep track of how many cards are in your deck, because I have lost 1 or 2 games by 1 card as far as the damage going through, and it's one of those things where you don't really know, but they got these tricks. So just keep track of what the cards are so you know when you should play it. A lot of times people will get it in their starting hand and they're like, hey, I don't want this. Just remember that Force Illusion can also be used as a tactic to throw them off your scent. So if you have a Force Illusion early game, okay, and let's say you discard it and you draw into it, okay, or you somehow have 2 and you just want to throw back 1 or whatever the case may be, you can use it to place it on Kylo to keep them on Kylo, or use it to place it on Pryce. So even though you have it early game, remember it's a deterrent also, and use that in your advantage as a mind game to try to throw them off the scent of who you want. Pryce is great to have. If you can kind of throw it on Kylo early game, they continue to push towards him. They're kind of beating a horse that's really strong, especially at that 12 health point. And then as you can get the heirlooms on it, get him something that's going to redeploy over to Pryce, and that really kind of helps, especially if they're going after Pryce first. Just things to kind of keep in mind. Think outside the box there with that.
Yep.
The next auto include, I feel this is definitely auto include, and at 2 in this deck is Force Speed. So Ray, talk a little bit more about that.
So, you know, speed is your friend in this deck, and I tell Ashton as well, this deck is so good right now because it has the ability to be fast and hit hard, you know, if you control the battlefield. If you're playing on your own battlefield, which we'll get into a little bit later, and, you know, why that works so well in this deck, but if you're playing, you know, on your own battlefield, you're going to be able to hit harder, but the Force Speed just really smooths everything out as far as keeping that tempo up. And then, you know, since you're resolving specials, you can certainly resolve Arinda's specials and fix your die, and then, you know, resolve your Force Speed, take 2 additional actions. There's a lot of play here. It just keeps, you know, the aggression and the pace that you want to move at, which is essentially just a little bit faster than your opponent, because you always want to maintain the battlefield. So I don't think there's too much we need to say about Force Speed and some of these other cards, but, you know, that's essentially what it's trying to do, and it works really well in this deck.
Yep, and Force Speed loves to hit them specials. That's for sure.
Yep.
All right, so the next card is Heirloom. So I think that this is by far one of the best 3-cost weapons out there, especially for blue aggro players right now. It's just the base sides are phenomenal, and the fact that it redeploys off a blue character is like just exactly what this card needs. So without going a lot into this, one of the things that you'll notice is the shield and the resource, and you'll notice here also, like on Force Speed, you have the shield. If you go and look at Crossguard, you got the shield, you got the resource. If you look over here at Ancient, this is going to have the shield and it has the resource. So it's one of those things to keep in mind that even though you have these weapons at certain times, don't be afraid to grab them resources to further your board state, because you're going to hit that resource. At some point in time, you're going to hit a resource when you're loaded up. Don't be afraid to grab 1 or 2 resources to use for your next play. Remember that you can always use some of these weapons like the Ancient or even like the Crossguard lightsaber, more likely to use this as a replacement. So you have the Crossguard, you get that 1 ping, right? You're going to get the 2, you're going to get the 1, and you're going to get the special, right? But if you can overwrite with the Heirloom before Kylo dies or whatever, to get at least on the field for 1 more activation or to redeploy over, and only pay 1 instead of paying the full 3 cost, do it. Because essentially, like when I played one of the first rounds, it really helped me when I replaced this over my Crossguard, or replaced this over the vibro knife, because you don't have to pay anything. You get it out there. It has the base side. You're guaranteed to hit something that's not modified. And right now you're seeing a lot of upgrades that have a lot of modified sides, and that could really screw you over, because if you're not hitting that base side and the deck doesn't have the synergy you need, you're screwed. So, but in this case, the base sides is what you want. It's extremely viable, and this is a definite auto-include, I think, in this deck as well. All right.
Yeah, then we have Vibro Knife. This has been wrecking face forever, but Vibro Knife again, just really good to keep the pace with that ambush action. And then if you are able to, you know, fix your die with a character like Pryce, it's nice to sneak through some unblockable damage. I was telling Ashten as well, if you have the battlefield, you hit a Pryce, you know, special, you can certainly switch this over to the base side and deal 2 unblockable damage. It is very viable in certain situations, so you know, be aware that, you know, one of your opponent's characters could certainly have, you know, a force illusion on their character, 3 shields, and having, you know, 1 to 2 health, thinking that they're completely shielded up and looking pretty safe at the moment, and then you're able to quickly, you know, do 2 unblockable. So Vibro Knife just super good, and like Ashten was saying, this does give you access to a discard as well as a resource. So in the right situations, don't be afraid to resolve that discard.
Absolutely. And resources are something that, you know, you'll see that you're going to need in this build. That you don't need a ton of it, but you know, you definitely need it to pull this mitigation off, to play these upgrades, to play this weapon. And sometimes you can just get that because a lot of times it is in your favor to be control of the battlefield. So if you need to just quickly grab that resource so you can, you know, get activation claim, do it. Don't try to discard to reroll to get the damage, because one of the things you'll notice is the Ancient, you know, it has that +3, but it only has 1 as the 2 base sides. And when you're looking at, let's say, Heirloom, you got the 1 and you got these 2 beefy sides. But other than that, if you're looking at some of these other weapons like the Vibro Knife and the Ancient and the Crossguard, you don't have a lot of the big sides unless they're modified. So if you can get that resource or get that shield, sometimes that's better than that 1 damage that you're most likely going to resolve. So remember that. And discards always hurt. I don't care who you are, discards always hurt. Because if you can get that mitigation out of their hand or throw off their strategy next play, that's a big thing. And they're not expecting it because they're like, okay, this is damage. They're just going to go for damage. Oh, they got that discard. They're not going to do nothing with it. I've won plenty of games by discarding 2 or 3 cards out of their hand. Or even, you know, they have 2 left remaining. You discard the 1. Oh, that's the one I needed. And then you're ended up taking out a character because they couldn't do anything because you got their force illusion. You know, or you got their hyperspace jump or something.
I think it's really, you know, needs to be pointed out that with Pryce, if you have the battlefield and you see that they're, you know, waiting to mitigate you, like I said, we'll get into the battlefield a little bit later, but I guess I'll touch it right now. It's Emperor's Throne Room, been around for a while. It's basically claim, flip one of your dice to showing a special, and then resolve that. And then with recent changes that have been pushed out from organized play, with Pryce's special, you are able to resolve a second dice. It's considered, you know, part of her card effect, so you are able to do that. But like I was saying with the Vibro Knife, or even with Pryce's dice, because she does have a discard herself, if you're seeing that your opponent has 2 cards in their hand and you want to, and you maintain the battlefield and you have a Pryce special floating out there, you can certainly just flip it over to the discard and take out those 2 cards out of their hand. That's why I think this deck is so versatile.
And resources and shields.
And resources, shields, you know, whatever you really need, you can look at them. As long as you control the battlefield, you know, you can look at that as a 2 side. And even if you don't control the battlefield, it's a focus. So you know, her dice are just so good.
So the next card we'll touch base on, and in this kind of base build that we have here, we're only including 1, is the Z6. So the greatest thing about this is that redeploy and those huge sides. So with this on the field and using her special claim, you know, that 3 can become a 4, and those 2 become 3. And it has redeploy, which is huge. So it doesn't matter who it goes out, and it's not restricted by color, which is really cool. So, you know, where you're not having to worry about, you know, it being like only blue or red, you can play it on whoever, depending on who they're going after, and then you get the effect of redeploying over. And the blanks don't matter. You know, it's all about the timing of when you activate Pryce and using that Pryce special to turn that over. But again, a Z6 is always scary to have, and the 3 cost is really not that hard to do, especially if you're kind of like playing towards it at the end of your round, getting ready to, you know, gain your 2 additional resources when you're doing the ready up phase. And it's not hard to obtain, just have to get your mind around it. And again, this die also shows, this die also shows a resource side. So again, it gives you something that you can use to pull in resources. And that's the greatest thing about this, is there's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of options to get what you need. So shields are good, and you have a lot of options for that, and resources are good. And if you're hitting 2 shields with her claim ability, or the special ability, I should say, excuse me, that's huge. 2 damage is still a lot. 3 damage is still a lot. And if you're mitigating that with shields, that's a big slowdown. Especially if you're stacking up and you're like, okay, I can do this. I got 1 more turn. I got 3 life left on their character, or 4 life left remaining. I know that I'm going to hit that 4. By the time I activate Kylo and that's half of what I need to resolve. And 4 damage is a lot. And we have a lot of characters that are at 8 health and 9 health. So that's almost half of some of these characters that you see when they're a widespread character base, which we're seeing more of now with vehicles and things of that sort. So there's a lot of damage this deck can do.
Yep. Can we scroll down on this just to get a bigger overview? Yeah, let's do just scroll up a little bit more.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect. All right, just to give you guys like an overview altogether of the actual deck list. But we're going to get into the events. So it's broken down into 13 upgrades and 17 different events. I don't know if that messes up the picture, but we'll go with it. So we're going to run 2 close quarters assaults. Again, just a great card to have in here. You know, Ray Ayla kind of made this popular, as well as Boba 7th. It's just an awesome card, and I think a lot of people were unaware of how effective it was. It kind of became like in 2017 or no, I guess 2018 regional season. It really popped in and made a name for itself. So yeah, certainly 2 copies here to just kind of rip out your opponent's hand. So I guess that's all it really needs to be said for that.
And then Doubt is another one of those cards that everyone's used since Spirit. It's just a 0 cost, reroll opponent's die, and then you either your opponent either resolves that die or remove it. A lot of times they get stuck with things like a shield or a resource or a disrupt, and not a lot of times it's always going to be damage. And I think a lot of people think too much like worst case scenario, like, but what if it hits a damage? Okay, what if it does? But at least if it does, it doesn't allow them to resolve the other modified base sides or modified sides that they had showing. So if you doubt like a 1 range and they're sitting with like a +2 range, or they have a 2 range and they see another +2 range out there as a modified side, doubt that base side and just get rid of it. Or, if you're looking at something that has a bunch of modified sides on it, like let's say like a Maul Saber or something, doubt that, and you have a really good chance of them not being able to resolve anything because it's modified. So there's ways around, using this card that is going to turn out for your benefit.
Right. And if your opponent, if you're playing against a villain deck, majority of the time they will have doubts in their deck. It's just kind of like an auto include mitigation. If they doubt a Pryce dice or die, it is extremely unfavorable for them. It's similar to like a Boba Fett. Doubting a Boba Fett dice never felt good. Sometimes they're forced to do it, but yeah, doing that to a Pryce dice, you can certainly hit that special, and then if you resolve it, you flip one of your other dice to something that you wanted.
Right, exactly.
Yep, 2 for your angers. I mean, just good villain removal. I think that's
that's
good enough.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Hidden Motive. I'm sure everybody knows about this card. This card really works. It's another 0 cost. It's a way of keeping them from resolving modified sides again, because we're seeing a lot of that. Ways of getting rid of like discards or kill shots, let's say, with the dice that they need to just pull off their triggers, whatever it is. It's an auto include. It's neutral. It's just fantastic card. Yep. And Intimidate. There you go.
Yeah, Intimidate. Since we need the battlefield that's Emperor's Throne Room, if that card didn't exist, the battlefield would most likely be Ewok Village, just because it's just hate against shields, and Intimidate works really well in here. I think you could also maybe play around with Frighten, but you want to keep your events pretty cheap. Like I said, this is like very, very similar to an aggro deck like Boba 7th, where it can dish out ridiculous amounts of damage. It can, do some nice tricks here and there, but you want to keep your events pretty cheap. And Intimidate's great just to knock off, 3 shields. It's basically 3 damage for 0 if you use it right.
Exactly. And that's the big thing, like we were talking about earlier, is using cards or doing things that's doing damage without resolving your die. And that is right. That's a great way of putting it, Ray, is that Intimidate is damage for 0. Any way you look at it. All right, so lightsaber pool. So in this particular build, they're showing 1, and I feel that it still should be at 2. And me and Ray were kind of talking about this a little bit more before recording. It's just a way to get what you want all the time. If you're not starting off with that crossguard lightsaber, you can still lightsaber pool to get it. If you need an ancient, you got it. You know, if you need that heirloom, you got it. If you want to pull out the vibro knife, you got it. So if you're playing against stuff that has shields, go after vibro. If you're looking for something that's a wider character spread, you can go after like the heirloom. If you're looking for like the Shoto, if you're running Shotos in the deck, it's just so great. It's 0. You can play it at the end of your turn or at the beginning. You know, it's even a card that you can have in certain situations if you need it, but it's not a big deal if you have to discard it to reroll. And sometimes, like, you don't want to have cards in your deck just, oh yeah, they're here just in case I need to discard to reroll. Like, that's dumb. You want to have cards that you need, but this is one of those situational cards that you can live without, but it's really good when you need it. So it's an auto include, I feel, as well. 1 or 2, but that's debatable. But
I'm gonna keep talking about lightsaber pool because I know Bobby Sapphire, he has like a hate on lightsaber pools. But the big thing that I like about this is if you look at things like redeployable upgrades in your deck. So for instance, we're going to take this deck and say that it has 3 redeployable upgrades with 2 heirlooms and 1 Z6 Rye control baton. When you include 1 or 2 lightsaber pools, I prefer 2 in most builds that have blue upgrades. You can't draw on the Z6 Rye control baton. You can't go and grab that because it's not a blue weapon upgrade. But you can grab those heirlooms if you're looking for something, right away to redeploy. Because that's one of the worst things that can happen to you is you're running redeployable upgrades in your deck, and one of your characters is about to go down, and you have the resources, but you just don't have the card in your hand. If you look at this build now, aside from its utility lightsaber pool with ancient lightsaber and being able to kind of pop it, grab it again, and pop it again to heal damage. Aside from that, a point that I want people to look at is with this deck only having 3 redeploys, with 1 or 2 lightsaber pools, you can look at now at this deck having 5 redeployable upgrades, which is huge as far as like timing. And you want a redeployable upgrade when you need it, and lightsaber pool allows you to just flood your deck with more things that you want to go and dig for rather than luck of the draw. This now means 2 more copies or 1 more copy of every blue weapon upgrade in your deck, and that just is going to make you a lot more consistent. It's going to make those times where you really need something, it's going to be there, or you're going to have a way to get to it. So I'm a huge fan of lightsaber pool. I think it's an amazing card, and I'll have to talk to Bobby about it.
Yeah, and one of the things is that instead of running like a Z Riot control baton, it's probably better to run like a Dagger of Mortis, because if you're looking at the 3 cost, upgrade that's redeployable, you can at least get something that you can pull, because Dagger of Mortis, is something that you can actually pull, right? Because it's a blue weapon versus with the Z6, you can't pull it, and it's still the same cost, it's still redeployable, and it has basically the same damage, so to speak. But then it does give you the whole fact of pulling a shield over, which is cool if it's played on Kylo. So I don't know if that would be a good switch for that, but
well, I think a lot of the times the reason people didn't like 1-in-1 split with like an heirloom and a dagger is just because the dagger has the modified side, but you can certainly say, I don't feel like paying for the 1 on the Riot control baton is worth it. I'll just throw the dagger in and take the 3, because they essentially have the same die sides, but Dagger of Mortis has the modified side, and it also gives you a shield. So you could definitely find more value in a Dagger of Mortis as opposed to the Z6. And then, like Ashton said, you could certainly pull. So I think that's definitely a flex position there.
Yeah.
I think I beat that into the ground enough.
All right, so let's go to logistics here. So this was something that, we were talking a little bit about, as far as I'm used to running cards like, it binds in place of something like this. Logistics is nice because it gives you the resource for 0, versus it binds really slows you down, because you have to, get it out there. You have to then be able to use it only for a blue upgrade or blue lightsaber. So it's like one of those things that is very situational. Versus with logistics, it's 0. You know, you spot a red character, which is going to be your Pryce here, and you're going to resolve potentially a Pryce die for 2 resources, or depending on the situation, maybe a Kylo die. But a lot of times you're going to see more damage on Kylo, and you're going to see more things to help you with your game style and your gameplays with Pryce. She's kind of like your engine. She's kind of like your variety there. So a lot of times you can use it to resolve the 2 for her to put a weapon onto Kylo or something. But I think this is a better choice over at Binds for sure. I have seen quite a bit of builds with it Binds. I just think logistics is going to give you more of what you need, which is a resource, and it's not going to slow you way down.
Yep. Yeah, it's just great to, I feel like in Destiny, the saying should be more money, no problems.
Yeah.
Because the more money you can generate, and, you know, logistics has certainly been doing that all the way from Awakenings, you'll just be set up, you know, in a better position later down the road.
Yeah, and it's just the fact that, like, it binds cost you 1, and it has to be a blue upgrade. That's the part that kind of pisses you off, and then it like decreases it by 1. So it's like you have to pay 1, so you're not going to get your weapon out. But the only way you are going to get it out is by activating it, versus just paying your 2 resources to get it out right away. And then, you know, if you had a vibro knife or something in your hand, and you have and you're stuck with it binds, and you're drawing hand or whatever, no matter if you mulligan or draw, you're stuck with those 2. It's like, man, this really sucks. Because I can throw the binds out, but I can't do nothing with it. So it's like, you know what I mean? Versus if I had a logistics to use the 2 resources, play it, you know, get your ambush action, activate Kylo or activate Pryce out as your ambush action. And then if you happen to hit any kind of resource side, which you know you're going to see as it's going through the upgrades, you see that that's very commonly spread out. You can then resolve the logistics. So that's kind of the point of logistics versus it binds, because you have to pay for it to be out there. Yet you do get to keep it. But again, if you have things like vibro knife, or you have things like, you know, the Z6 or something like that, it's not going to benefit you.
Yep. What do we got next?
Overconfidence. Everyone's seen a lot of this.
Yeah, so overconfidence is great. It's 1 resource for 2 different dice. I like to look at it as you're going to remove 1 of those dice and then manipulate another. The reason I think you're only going to see like 1, maybe none in this deck is because it is spot blue.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a decent amount of cards in your event suite that is spot red, spot blue, and just being able to get away from that in any deck, or limiting that to keeping it more situational is good. So it looks like, you know, this deck's gonna probably just have 1 overconfidence.
Yeah, it does. It's just showing 1.
Yep.
And I mean, you see people that use it to re-roll their dice and then their opponent's dice, you know, but I mean, most of the time people are going to use it to try to just mitigate 1 of their dice and then also change the value side. So, I mean, there is other mitigation that can be better than this. And we're seeing a lot of mitigation, and we're going to go touch on a few more cards that isn't on this build list before we conclude this whole, you know, wrap on what's going on with Kylo and Pryce now. But you'll see that there's other mitigation, but it's much more expensive to manipulate or change 2 die. So I think where this kind of fits in is it's still only 1, it's still cheap, and it still messes with 2 die without it having to cost 2 or 3. So that's why it's still played right now, I feel. And good old Tactical Mastery, man. That's been a great card since the beginning, and it is definitely designed for this deck. So, Ray, go ahead and talk about a few strategies that you've used Tactical Mastery for so far.
So in my deck build of Vader Pryce, I quickly realized that I made a mistake by only putting 1 Tactical Mastery in it, and this card is pretty disgusting in this deck. Just being able to you know, play Tactical Mastery, roll in a character, quick resolve, you know, that's great to do, you know, in that fashion. But, you know, when you're running things like Force Speed and, you know, you are showing a Tactical Mastery and you're showing the special on the Force Speed, you're able to attack Mastery into rolling into a character, second action, resolve the Force Speed, and now you're looking at 2 more additional actions. So there's just a lot of utility in the card. I don't think it needs to go much further, but this is another one of those reasons, and I wanted to kind of wait until we got to this, that people will go after Pryce. You know, Tactical Mastery is spot red, Logistics is spot red, and then she, you know, is the overall engine of the deck. So we do have some cards, and the next one is also pretty crucial. But there's some ways that it's spot red, and if you're able to take Pryce down early, if you were going against this deck, you're going to turn off things like Tactical Mastery.
Yeah, absolutely. All right,
along with this card. Yep.
So this card comes in clutch so much in this deck. The best defense, and that's exactly what it is. So Pryce, you know, it's one of those things where you want to keep her alive, right? So this kind of feels like, man, this is kind of defeating the purpose of what you're trying to do. You know, you want to kind of keep her alive because she's your engine and so forth and so on. But you have things like the ability to resolve a side of a die showing a shield for more than one shield. So you have ways of keeping those shields. And Ray was kind of talking to me a lot about this, coaching me through as I was playing a little bit of it, as far as how you spread out your shields. And, you know, obviously you want to try to keep your 2 shields on Pryce for an instance of just this. You know, your Pryce is only going to take 1 damage instead of 3. That's huge. 1 damage is nothing. But you got rid of 2 dice for 1 card, which just shuts down a lot of decks. You shut down the 2 character die, like they roll out early game. You got a best defense. You take out their character die. It's like, okay, now I get to do whatever the heck I want to do because you got 1 more character activate out or so forth and so on. Or even in vehicle decks, you wait for them to do all this crazy stuff, get these resources, use their characters, use through all the mitigation to build up to this nice big ramp. They roll out their vehicle and you're like, okay, it's gone. And they're like, okay, you know, and it does hurt you. So like, they don't care too much really about it. Like, okay, all right, well, at least, you know, I got 3 on her, which means that she's just about 1/3 of the way dead. But then you use things like Ancient Lightsaber to heal the 2. You continue to act, you know, throw on shields, or you use Force Illusion. There's all sorts of ways to kind of tank her out a little bit more. So, but it's definitely something that I feel should be 2 of. A lot of people usually run 1 best defense. I ran 2 in the deck that I was running, and I feel like that was what I needed. Because if I didn't want to do it, I could still discard it. But it was great to have it, you know, more so in the beginning of the plays, and then also at the end of the game when you need it as a closer to finish removing the die for that get really deadly later on.
Yeah. And what Ashton was kind of mentioning as far as like spreading out the shields. So if you you know, have the shields, the opening part of the game, you know, they select their battlefield and they're going to give you those shields. If I'm going against a villain deck, I will typically spread out the shields, 1 on Kylo, 1 on Pryce. Reason being is other villain decks do have access to Intimidates and Frightens and ways to just pop your shields off. So if you load them up on 1 character, chances are they do have a way to just pop them, you know, off, and they essentially became, you know, useless. But if you are against a hero deck, it is a smart idea to put both the shields on Pryce. It's going to bring both of your characters to 12 health, which is pretty formidable. And then, like Ashton was saying, the first time you use best defense, it's only going to deal 1 damage to your character, which is going to be Pryce. So that's why I load up the double shields on Pryce. And yeah, the best defense is one of the best removal cards in villain red.
And I like 2 because, again, to kind of touch base on like why you would include 2 cards in a deck is because you want to potentially see that card in early game and in late game. You're like, Force Speed's a little different. Like Force Speed, you want to have 2 because you really want it in your first like 1 or 2 rounds. So you really want that card, so you're including 2 there. But this is including 2 more for a different reason. Not so much to have it in your beginning round, but to potentially have it in the beginning. If you have to use it to discard or reroll, you can still potentially draw it later game when it's really going to matter, when you got all these dice saturation on the field, and you can pick away some of that base side or pick away some of those discards. Because we are seeing a lot of mill, and DJ does exist. So it's like, you know, you got DJ, you got Cassian, you have, you know, Snoke and all these different things. Cad Bane's out there with Snoke now. You remove 2 Cad Bane die. It's like, okay, now what are you going to do? Like, you completely cripple that deck. And so there's different things that you can do. But this is a great card to have 2 of. And if it's in a situation where you're like, man, I don't want to kill Pryce, you know, I'm not going to use it, then you just discard or reroll it. But it's good to have later game for sure.
Yep.
All right, well, that kind of concludes the base of what you're going to see with this deck, what people are mostly going to be running. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go a little bit more into some of the cards that I saw and experienced, and some cards that Ray has seen and experienced, and why they may potentially be put into the standard base of what this deck is, and how they can be very impactful in this deck.
Yep. You want to start this one off?
Yeah, so the first one we'll talk about is Probe. So this card is great. I definitely feel we're going to see more of it. It's kind of one of those cards like you see like in Destiny where like close quarter assaults, like what Ray was touching base on. Like you see it, people kind of played with it and tampered with it, and then as it started being played more like Boba 7th, people are like, wow, this thing's got a lot of potential. Like they're ripping like 3-4 cards out of my hand, which is huge. Like that really messes a player up, and it makes you feel great when you're like, okay, they can't discard a reroll, they can't play mitigation, they can't do nothing. Well, Probe's really good because right now, you know, with all the mitigation that we have, the likelihood of people having, you know, events and things in their hand is much greater. And what I experienced at my store championship, which I agree that you can't just base everything off of what you see in the store championships. Like you're going to see some janky stuff, but you're going to see some of these decks start rising and start being drawn out into the open of what's really viable. And Probe is going to be that card that's really going to help you because you look at 2 random cards. Okay, so for Kylo, this really works because you get an idea of what's in their hands. So if you get 2 random cards and they're both blue. Okay, well, maybe you want to call blue, especially if they only have 3 cards in hand at the time, or if they have 2 cards in the hand at a time, obviously. But you get to look at 2 random cards in opponent's hand and discard any of those cards that are events. And again, I'm seeing tons and tons of events. Lots of things people are playing. So, and it's 0, so it fits right into our economy of what we're trying to put with this deck. It's not spot blue, it's not a spot red, it's a 0, and you get to discard 2 random cards, but if they are events, they're gone. And that's huge.
Yeah, so Probe is a card where you really have to pick your spot when you're going to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, personally, like I like to slow play Probe.
Yes.
Just meaning, you know, if we all start off every round with 5 cards in our hand, you know, a perfect situation would be an upgrade is played. You know, your opponent will play an upgrade. They might pitch to reroll. You really want to wait until your opponent is down to 3 cards, ideally 2 because you get to look at 2 random cards. But you know, 3 cards, being able to potentially rip out 2 of them or hit, you know, one of those big events that they were kind of holding on to, like Ashton was saying, you know, waiting for you to roll out. You know, I try to not give them the pleasure of rolling out before I probe. So you know, it's good to, if you have to take some actions and you have to do a little something, roll out Pryce, and, you know, you kind of watch your opponent's hand. And once you start getting down to that 3 cards left in hand range, that's when you can certainly probe with, you know, a good advantage that you're going to take out an event or 2.
Well, think about it. You know, let's say that you're in control of the battlefield. Better yet, if they're in control of it, kind of helps you more for a probe play. But let's say you play a weapon for 2. Okay, now it's their turn. Now they're going to do something. They're either going to roll out or they're going to, you know, play an upgrade depending on the deck you have. Now it's your turn. Okay, so you can do something else. You can, you know, activate Kylo if you want, or activate Pryce. But either way, you can do a few actions there to try to at least get something done. Now you may want to just play, let's say, an upgrade, and then it's their turn. Let's say they activate. You play some mitigation. Okay, now it's back to them. You know, you kind of slow play that a little bit so you can try to get them down to that 3 cards in hand. And then you would be able to use that, and that's great. And then you activate Kylo, ideally last, after you kind of know what they have, because it gives you more of an idea of what's in their hand. But yeah.
Yep, probe's great.
Conclude that. Probe's great. All right. You guys have seen this, I'm sure. Scorched Earth. So, Ray, go ahead and start with this one.
So the reason this is in here is dice saturation is always a strategy within Star Wars Destiny. You have decks running around there like Plo Koon and the 2 Padawans. If your main objective is to consistently control the battlefield, then ideally this would be turned on more frequently than not. So being able to let your opponent, again, you're going to slow play this, let your opponent, you know, activate their characters. If you're playing against a vehicle deck, let them activate those supports. It does cost 2 resources, so it's a little much, but this is certainly something, if you're able to kill one of the first characters that they have, and then, you know, all this indirect is going into one character. If they are, you know, a 3Y type of deck, like I said with Plo Koon and the Padawans, it is nice to say, okay, 7 indirect. It's a very impactful card, and you know, I think that when you're running a deck that is, you know, kind of formatted on claiming the battlefield, a card like this will certainly fit in there.
And it's one of those things that's really mostly played like mid game, because that's when you're going to get the dice saturation out. Like
Yep.
Plo Koon and Padawan, like, yeah, you're going to get that kind of early, and you may not necessarily want to spend two resources on that early. But mid game, it's really nice. And by that time, you kind of got your upgrades out, and you kind of have a little bit more money to spend, and it kind of feels a little easier and more convenient. So this might be something you might just want to include one of. So if you draw it, you're going to draw it usually mid game. Okay, or later game, and then you get it in your opening hand. Not a big deal. You mulligan that out, and you hope that you don't draw it again. But it's something that you would mostly include one of. And the next card we'll kind of touch base on, and I kind of want to give a shout out to Warren Evans up in Jacksonville. So where my store championship was this Sunday, the 22nd of July. Was over in Jacksonville at Cool Stuff, and Warren Evans kind of ran that event, did a great job. He's always a super nice guy, always got a smile on his face, always super energetic, and like, let's play some Destiny. I don't care if we win or lose, let's just have some fun. And he actually placed second with Kylo Ren and Pryce. And one of the things that he ran was Chance Cube in this deck. And he had some good theories with this as far as using this with Pryce to generate, let's say, 4 resources, or turning it to the side you want for the 3 resource, and using that to afford a lot of the newer mitigation that we're seeing and be able to keep up with a lot of the dice removal. And he ended up going second. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he ended up placing second there due to like a dice roll off. But another card he was playing as well was Scorched Earth. Another card he was playing was Probe. And I was running more of the conventional build that we kind of went over earlier. And these are some tricks that he ran that really worked for him. And I thought this was a nice card to include because you see a lot of Chance Cube. And Cat, which a lot of people probably know him from Discord channels and stuff, like Cat includes this card in like every deck he builds. It's really funny. They're like, hey, so what card should I include here? Throw Chance Cube in. And I joke about that, but it's one of those things where it's like, it does have a place. And it's also a card that you can use to bounce back into your hand, or something that kind of maybe helps with, situations where you want to discard or reroll it, or whatever the case may be. But it does make money. The 3 blank sides scare a lot of people, but in a deck like this where you may hit the focus side on a 4-speed, or you may hit that special side on a Pryce, you can get it where you need it. And that's why I wanted to mention that, because I think it is something that could be potentially played in this build and something to think about.
Yep.
All right, so the next card we're going to go over, Ray, if you want to read this one off.
So this is a new card from Way of the Force. It is a event that costs 2 resources. It's called Lack of Faith. It says spot a blue character that is 15 or more points to remove all of a character's character dice. So Ashten had actually brought this card to my attention. I actually did not see it myself.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. I either I didn't like it when I first, was going through and opening up my boxes, or I just didn't take enough notice to it. I think it certainly is a good card. I don't particularly like the spot blue. I try to really stay away from, play restrictions. Sometimes it is what it is, but I think it, for 2 resources, it's cool to get the 2 character dice. And certainly if you're playing against, a big scary character that, might have some 3 sides or hit 2 2s, you can play this, and it's 2 dice for 2 resources. So it's not bad at all.
It's one of those things too that if you're building this deck pairing with Kylo and Pryce, and you're trying to do a neat spin with it, something that's going to benefit you. If you're trying to load this deck up with mitigation, which is essentially what Warren was trying to do with this deck, this is a great card for it, because it's something that you can throw in there. It's something that is more dice mitigation, and it's removing all of a character's character dice. So it's not going to help if you're running against a bunch of single die characters. But when you're removing 2 character dice, I mean, that's a huge thing. That's shutting down what you're trying to do with a character. And against other aggro decks, it just shuts them down. So.
Yep. I got to take this next card, too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm like in love with this.
All right, here we go.
So this is also a brand new card from Way of the Force. I hope I say it right. It's like Beguile.
Yeah.
Beguile.
I think Beguile is right. Yeah.
Right. So I think that this is way better than like Entangle. Beguile is amazing.
I think so. You're rerolling all of an opponent's die.
Yes, it's For 2 resources, we have an event here. It's neutral blue, and it's reroll an opponent's dice. So that's 1 dice. Turn 1 of their dice to any side. That could be a second dice, and then remove 1 of their dice. So you could pay 2 and do this to the same dice because it doesn't say a different dice. You can re-roll that dice. You could turn it to a different side, and then you can remove it. But if you want to get the most bang out of your buck here, you could do that to 3 different dice. So for 2 resources, you have kind of a way to. I look at it as like an overconfidence on steroids, because you're re-rolling 1 of the dice, you're turning 1 to a blank, and then you're removing another one. So
it's kind of like a sound the alarm and overconfidence kind of combined in a sense. Like you're kind of rolling everything that's showing damage, and then you're turning it, you know what I mean, and then you're removing something. So
yep, I think it's an awesome card. You're gonna remove 1 dice, but you're certainly going to kind of, if they're showing like 8 damage or 6 damage between 3 different dice, you can certainly turn that off and disrupt that pretty quickly. And especially if they pitch to re-roll their last card, and then you hit them with a beguile, like that's about it for them. So
right. Yeah, it's definitely a great card, and I'm seeing more of this being played. It's cool because I kind of get the opportunity to kind of see some of the new stuff from this block versus like with the first set from Awakening. I wasn't really involved in this game that much, but then when the legacy block started hitting, you're starting to see a lot of these legacy cards kind of fading in and fading out, and then you're kind of seeing which ones are starting to stick, and I think this is going to be a card that's going to start sticking more.
Yeah, I think people are going to kind of start to see the value in it, and I've replaced it in a lot of decks that I have the blue access to, and I had like an Entangle there. I replaced it with a Beguile, like in my Hero Vehicles decks and things like that.
All right, guys, so I appreciate everybody hanging with us so far. I know this has been kind of a lengthy video. We got probably about 5-6 more cards we're going to go through, and we'll kind of wrap this thing up. But this is something that me and Ray have been kind of talking about doing for a while. It's kind of a way of us kind of getting our thoughts out on this. So it's kind of one of those things where we send text back and forth, or we do Marco Polos, but we just kind of want to get this out in the open and talk about our thoughts, because we want to hear what you guys have to say. We want to hear what you think about this card, see what you think about this card, because essentially, and a lot of people have said this before, good decks don't just come from one person. Okay,
yep.
The top meta decks don't come from just Ray or just Ashten or just Kevin. We all know it doesn't come from Kevin. No, I'm kidding. I gotta dog him a little bit, but it comes from the collective group of the community, and it's one of those things where we're all trying to explore this game together. So without going down a big rabbit hole there, it's one of those things where we're throwing these cards up here that may seem like straight junk, but it's one of those things where could they still be good? We're just not looking at things right. Did I not place higher at my store championship because I wasn't looking at the cards right? Should I have claimed instead of discarded? Should I have included some of these other cards, or should I have done something different? And that's where you're not going to know unless you talk to other players, and you're not going to know unless you read things. And I like to listen more than I like to read. So I love content like this, to where I can just drive down the road and I can listen to this let's talk about Pryce and Kylo, and just kind of listen to it and think about certain things, and I don't have the necessary time or ability to be able to read the stuff. So it's here for you guys to give you a different format, whether you're reading this on the screen or listening to it on the podcast version, like let's say on iTunes, or let's say what else do we use? We use Shout Engine, we use iTunes,
Google Play. Hopefully it translates well, because I think that we have been reading out all the cards. So for a player who's a little bit more familiar, hopefully this is making sense to you. But for newer players, I would suggest come over to our YouTube channel, because we're doing this on YouTube, and then we're just going to rip the audio and throw it to iTunes and Google Play. So hopefully it works for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, if this is a format that you guys enjoy, and it's kind of more of an in-depth talk about this, and it's something you guys want us to continue, then obviously we'll do a better job at reading out the cards and getting through that part of it quicker, and not get on too much of a rant. So we'll go and touch on this next card here, and this is something that you see a little bit of in certain decks, and in this deck, New Orders, I feel, is a card to really think about, because yes, it is 2, but it switches the battlefield with a battlefield that's not being used, and you get to use its claim ability. So you're not in control of the battlefield if your opponent is at the time when you use this, so you can't trigger the +1 off of Pryce's special, but it still allows you to be able to use, the ability of, resolving a special, okay, on a character or on a die, let's say. So that could work for your crossguard lightsaber. It could also work for Pryce. Could work for your 4-speed, something of that sort. So you could New Orders with 4-speed out, resolve the 4-speed, or resolve the Pryce, then turn the 4-speed to a special, then, whatever it is, you can special chain off this card. And that's kind of why this is here.
Yep. I think we should probably cut this shorter.
Yep.
Pick
and we'll go to the next one.
Pick like 2 more.
Dark
Pick
Ritual.
2 more, Ashton.
Oh man, Mind Trick. This card messes with me. This card pisses me off. I think this is a card to definitely include. So we'll pick this one. We'll pick one more. So Mind Trick, as you guys know, spot a blue character, which kind of sucks because you have to spot Kylo. But it forces an opponent to divide their dice into 2 groups. Okay, and then you choose one group and you remove all the dice in it. That is going to mess with your opponent every time. And I'm seeing this more. I think this is something that I keep wanting to call it Bejeweled, but it's not Bejeweled. It's Begule, whatever Ray tried to say it was. But that mitigation card, Beguile, that's the one. So it's kind of like this, like it's a card that messes with you, and it's something that you're going to see more of. And I definitely think this is worth talking about, and situations that we've come up against, because no matter what, I'm always stuck removing 3 die. And I don't know, every single time someone plays this against me, I'm stuck removing 3 die, because they always play it when the dice are being saturated, and it's getting old quick. And it's something that I should have included in this deck, because I'm seeing a lot of dice, and it's definitely a way of mitigating things faster.
Yeah, you never make the right decision when a Mind Trick is played against you.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. All right,
it is hard.
The last card, yep, Price of Failure. So
okay, so
go ahead.
I saw this at my store championship. His name is Frenchie, and he was also playing a Kylo Pryce deck, and he played a single copy of Price of Failure. And me and Ashton were kind of talking about this. His rationale was, with Pryce being the support character, if you go through later in the game and she's still around, and Kylo just needs to eke out a little bit more damage, if you've put your 2 best defenses in her, she's pretty wounded, you can certainly roll her out, get some value from her, and then Price of Failure to get the reactivation on Kylo. Essentially that opens up having 2 times that you're able to activate Kylo in 1 round, which could be 4 potential damage, and that's aside from any of the upgrades that he has on him. So I think that this could certainly find a home. I don't think 2 copies is really worth it. No. But certainly, the one of as a utility, at times.
And just to kind of touch on that real quick, if you've used your best defense and you've already put 3 into Pryce, and your opponent's already put some damage in at this time, and you draw this later game, this is better to have than the best defense, because the best defense may kill Pryce to remove 2 die, but that's fine. Just knock her out and activate Kylo, get your 2 additional damage at the time. Probably later in that round, your opponent's going to have less cards anyway, and it's going to give you the ability to maybe choose the right color a little easier, and you go forward as far as trying to take the character out, because that loaded up Kylo late game does a lot of damage. So
I will say this as like a teaser, and then we can just end this thing.
Yeah, you got it.
We'll go out on this. Is I saw someone playing Elite Snoke, Elite Balatik, Teak, if you want to say, and 1 Jawa, and he was using Price of Failure to get a reactivation with Bala, and then killing a character, and then getting another reactivation. It was a crazy deck. But all right, enough of that.
All right, guys, again, make sure that if you guys have not checked out our live stream, you definitely, if you're a Patreon member, you definitely don't want to miss the next Saturday live stream at 10 p.m. It is going to be on the 28th, correct? Is that right, Ray?
Yes,
28th, right?
Saturday 28th.
Yep, Saturday the 28th at 10 p.m. We will be announcing the lucky winner of an entire box of Way of the Force. So we're super excited. All of our Patreon members, thank you so much for your support, and we could not do this without you. You guys are the drive behind the Jackalmen Games guys. Kevin was not able to join us because he is getting married Friday, so we're super excited for him. So he's gonna be busy, so don't expect a lot of content from him because he's got a lot of planning and things that he's putting in place here. And but again, 10 p.m. Check us out on YouTube, Jackalmen Games, and if you're not a Patreon member and you'd like to find out more about that, we'll have links in this video below. And thank you guys so much for your time, and please give us some feedback on the new format of Let's Talk.
Thank you very much. We'll check you guys next time.
Take it easy.
If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to head over to the Jackalmen Games Patreon page, where patrons receive exclusive content as well as access to our Discord channel, where you can interact with Kevin, Ashten, and Ray on a daily basis. Any amount that you can provide is greatly appreciated, and we'll see you next time on Jackalmen Games.